Hello there everyone, this is Mr. Brass, and today I'm going to talk to you about Norse mythology. Now that we've touched on Greek and Roman mythology, let's get into Norse mythology. Norse mythology is very different from the previously mentioned. Asgard is where the gods live, and it doesn't match heaven, as we would imagine it would. No joy is to be found in Asgard, or the assurance of bliss, but rather a threat of inevitable doom. Unlike the gods in Greek and Roman culture, the Norse gods weren't immortal and they died. They knew one day they'd fall to their enemies, but the fighting in the face of this fact was a key thing. The gods knew they'd ultimately lose, but if they could postpone that for a little while longer, they would. This was a value very much shared by the Norse people. If they were to battle and died, they'd rather die resisting. A brave death will give a person a seat in Valhalla, aka one of the halls of Asgard, but even Asgard will fall alongside the gods one day. Heroism to a Norse man is not about necessarily conquering evil, but to resist evil even when you're losing. Norse mythology does allow for free will in the sense that the hero can choose between yielding to the enemy or dying. Sad to say, a lot of the traditions and stories of the Norse people were obliterated by Christians who hated paganism. Pieces of it exist, like in the form of Beowulf and Nibelungiled. If it weren't for the two Icelandic Eddas, knowledge of the Norse religion would be virtually non-existent. One of the most important works is the Elder Edda, which is the oldest manuscript, being dated around 300 years after Christians arrived, but the poems maintain much of their pagan culture. It is made up of separate poems and is written sort of awkwardly. It talks of men who've seen victory in death. The Younger Edda has its perks. It was written down in the last part of the 12th century by Snorri Sturluson, and it contains prehistoric mythological material which the Elder Edda lacked. To a Norseman, the Greek gods could never be heroic because they were immortal and by and far pretty much invincible, which meant they didn't have to defy danger. The Norse gods, however, were braved, were faced with threats of giants, and assured their defeat eventually. Odin was the big guy in charge. Odin is a rather strange figure amongst the gods, as while he sits in at the feast of the gods, he doesn't join in with eating. Odin has two ravens on his shoulders that travel through the world each day in order to bring back news of what each man does. Odin's main responsibility was to postpone Ragnarok, aka the Day of Doom. Odin hungers for wisdom and is seen sacrificing his well-being to obtain it. This is the case when he traded his eye for wisdom to Mimir the Wise. He'd give knowledge that he won by suffering to men. Odin had attendants called Valkyries, whom would go to the battlefield and decide who should win and who should die. Heroes would be brought to Valhalla. Odin's son Balder was considered most beloved of the gods, which is why when he died, it marked the first of the disasters on the gods. Frigga, his mother, went through the world beforehand to get an oath from all living things and non-living things to not harm Balder. She'd missed the mistletoe though, and Loki would trick Balder's blind brother Hoder into killing him by throwing said mistletoe at Balder, which pierced Balder's heart. Nanna, his wife, would die during Balder's funeral, and her body was placed on the great ship with him, which was lit on fire. Loki would be punished by being bound in a cavern with hot snake venom being poured on him every day. While goddesses were typically not seen as important as say they were in Greek tales, a goddess by the name Hela ruled the kingdom of death, which no god had authority over but her. Even Odin had no rule over it. Norse mythology did have a creation story. Basically, at first there was a chasm that didn't extend everywhere. To the north of it was Niflheim, the realm of the dead, and to the south was Muspelheim, the realm of fire. The Niflheim rivers would flow into the chasm, and it would be turned into ice, and the Muspelheim would turn some of that ice into mist. This mist would create water droplets that would form the first giant Ymir and the first frost maidens. Ymir would have a son whom we now know to be Odin. Odin and his brothers would kill Ymir and fashion the earth, sky, sea, earth, and heavens from his body. They'd take sparks from the Muspelheim to make the stars and the moon. The first man and woman were created from trees, man from ash and women from elm. Norse mythos also contained dwarfs, elves, and a giant ash tree named Yggdrasil, which supported the universe, and it went through the worlds. Another well was the Well of Knowledge, which was guarded by Mimir the Wise. The Yggdrasil had a holy well named Yurda's Well that was guarded by Yurda, Verdani, and Skuld, aka Past, Present, present, and future. The ash tree was doomed for destruction as a giant serpent chewed continuously at the root of the tree, hoping to topple it and bring down the universe. Jotunheim, Frost, and mountain giants were enemies of the gods and were powerful creatures in their own right. Even though everything was doomed, there was a bit of hope as the destruction of the world at Ragnarok would bring about a whole new other realm where the new gods would come about that would be more powerful than Odin and be all good. To wrap up here, the story of Signy and Sigurd. Signy was the daughter of Volsung, the king of Hanaland. Signy's husband, the Geatish king Siggeir, would kill her father and capture his sons so they one by one could be eaten by wolves. Signy managed to save one by the name of Sigmund, and they vowed to avenge their family. Signy would be unfaithful to her murderous husband and disguise herself to sleep with Sigmund and bared him a son named Sinfjötl, whom Signy gave to him after his birth and Sigmund raised to adulthood. During the years of Sinfjötl's time, Signy would still keep up her relations with Siggeir and bear him children, not showing him her secret that she wanted revenge. On the day of revenge, Sigmund and his son launched a surprise attack on the house, killing the children of Signy, and burned the house with Signy trapped inside. Signy would tell them during the attack that they had avenged the dead, and Signy would step into the burning house to die. The story of Sigurd can be briefly told. Basically, a Valkyrie named Brynhild disobeyed Odin and was punished with sleep until a man who knows no fear woke her. To show this, Odin surrounded the couch she was on with a fire that only a hero could brave through. Sigmund's son Sigurd would be the one for the job and would wake Brynhild. This would prove to be fruitless as he'd be made to forget about her by the Goo King's king Gunnar's mother, Grimhild, and marry Gunrun. Brynhild would wind up in that spot again, and Sigurd, in the form of Gunnar, though through magic by Grimhild, would save her again, but this time for Gunnar, and make her think Sigurd had cheated. Brynhild would learn the truth through a dispute with Sigurd's wife Gunrun, and planned her revenge. Brynhild would tell Gunnar that if he didn't kill Sigurd, she'd leave him, and Gunnar, wanting to hold to his brotherhood oath with Sigurd, got his younger brother to do it while Sigurd was asleep, thus leaving Gudrun to wake up in her husband's blood. Brynhild would later kill herself because of it. Well, that is all for today. This is Mr. Brass saying goodbye and get wise.